My son started screaming at his mother's funeral. What he revealed changed everything. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I thought I knew my life. All those years I was certain I understood who we were, where we were going, what held us together, marriage, family, routine. These things felt solid, real, like the foundation of a house you never question until the ground beneath it cracks. Emma and I had been together for 17 years. We met in college, married young, had Daniel when we were barely ready. But we made it work. At least that's what I told myself every morning when I watched her pour coffee with that absent look in her eyes, as if she were somewhere far away, somewhere I couldn't reach. There were good years, Daniel's first steps, beach vacations where we buried him in sand, and he laughed until his face turned red. Quiet Sunday mornings with pancakes and the newspaper spread across the kitchen table. Emma would read the arts section, I'd read sports, and Daniel would draw monsters in the margins of the comics. But somewhere along the way, the spaces between us grew wider. The silences lasted longer. Emma started taking evening walks alone. Sometimes she'd be gone for an hour, sometimes two. When she came back, her cheeks would be flushed, her eyes bright with something I couldn't name. I asked her once, "Where do you go?" "Just walking," she said. "I need to think." "About what?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Everything. Nothing. Does it matter?" I didn't press. Maybe I should have. Maybe if I'd pushed harder, demanded answers, refused to accept the growing distance between us, things would have been different. But I was afraid of what I might find if I looked too closely at the cracks in our foundation. Daniel noticed. He was 14 then, quiet and observant in the way some teenagers are. He'd watch his mother with those dark, intelligent eyes, tracking her movements around the house like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Sometimes I'd catch him listening outside our bedroom when Emma and I argued in whispered voices about things that didn't matter, unpaid bills, forgotten appointments, whose turn it was to pick up groceries. The real arguments, the ones that cut deep, we saved for when Daniel was asleep. Or so we thought. "You're never here," Emma said one night, her voice tight with something between anger and despair. "I'm working. Someone has to pay for this life you want." "This life I want? Is that what you think this is?" I didn't answer. The truth was, I didn't know what she wanted anymore. She'd stopped telling me years ago. 3 months before she died, Emma started seeing a therapist. She mentioned it casually over dinner, the way you'd mention buying milk or getting an oil change. "I made an appointment with someone," she said. "Dr. Chen. She's supposed to be good." Daniel looked up from his plate. "Why?" "Just to talk. Everyone needs someone to talk to." "You have Dad," Daniel said. Emma's smile was sad. "It's not the same, honey." I felt that like a punch to the gut, but I said nothing, just nodded and went back to my food. Daniel didn't go back to his food. He kept watching his mother, fork suspended halfway to his mouth, as if she'd just revealed something crucial, and he was the only one who'd caught it. The therapy sessions became routine. Every Tuesday evening at 6, Emma would come home lighter somehow, as if she'd set down something heavy for an hour and hadn't quite picked it up again. She'd smile more, touch my arm when she passed me in the kitchen, ask Daniel about his day with genuine interest instead of distracted obligation. I was grateful, relieved. I thought maybe we were fixing something I hadn't realized was broken. Then came the accident. That's what everyone called it. The accident. As if it were random, meaningless, an act of cruel chance that could have happened to anyone. Emma died on a Thursday, not a Tuesday, not on her way to therapy or coming home from it. Just a regular Thursday afternoon when she was supposed to be grocery shopping. Her car went off a bridge on Route 7, the one that curves along the river where the guardrails are old and the asphalt is always slick when it rains. It had been raining. The police said she must have taken the curve too fast, hydroplaned, lost control. The car broke through the rusted barrier and plunged 30 feet into the water. By the time they pulled her out, it was too late. No witnesses, no skid marks, just a gap in the guardrail and her car at the bottom of the river. I remember the officer standing in our doorway, hat in his hands, face arranged in practiced sympathy. I remember the words coming at me like they were underwater, muffled and impossible to grasp. I remember Daniel appearing behind me, silent, and the way the officer's eyes slid away from him, unable to meet the gaze of a boy who just lost his mother. I don't remember falling to my knees, but I must have, because later Daniel told me he'd caught me before I hit the floor. The days after were a blur. Family appeared from nowhere. My sister, Emma's parents, cousins I hadn't seen in years. They filled the house with casseroles and sympathy and an unbearable amount of noise. Everyone wanted to help, to comfort, to say something that would make it better. Nothing made it better. Daniel retreated to his room. He didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't break down the way I did behind closed doors. He just went quiet, quieter than before, as if he'd gone somewhere deep inside himself where grief couldn't reach him. Emma's best friend Rachel took charge of the funeral arrangements. She'd known Emma since high school, had been there for every major milestone in our lives. She held my hand while we picked out the casket, chose the flowers, wrote the obituary. She was a rock, steady and strong when I couldn't be. She would have wanted lilies, Rachel said, white ones. She always said they smelled like hope. I nodded, unable to speak. And the church on Maple Street. She loved that church, even though you two never went to services. Another nod. David, Rachel said, squeezing my hand. She loved you. Whatever happened between you two, whatever struggles you had, she loved you. You need to know that. I know, I whispered, but I didn't. Not really. Because if she loved me, why had she seemed so far away? Why had she needed a therapist to talk to instead of me? Why had she been taking those long walks alone, coming back with secrets in her eyes? The funeral was scheduled for Monday, 4 days after the accident, 4 days that felt like 4 years and 4 seconds all at once. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the doorway of Daniel's room, watching him pretend to be asleep. His breathing was too controlled, too measured. His eyes moved beneath his eyelids like he was watching something unfold that only he could see. Daniel, I said softly, are you okay? Stupid question. Of course he wasn't okay. Neither of us was okay. He didn't answer, didn't acknowledge me, just kept lying there with his eyes closed and his hands fisted in the blankets. I wanted to go to him, to hold him the way I had when he was little and woke from nightmares. But he felt miles away, unreachable, locked behind walls I didn't know how to scale. So I closed his door and went back to my empty bedroom, to the bed that still smelled like Emma's shampoo, and I stared at the ceiling until dawn crept through the windows. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. November in New England, the kind of day where the sky presses down on you and the wind cuts through your coat. Perfect weather for a funeral, I thought bitterly. Even the universe was playing along. I put on my black suit, the one I'd worn to our wedding, to job interviews, to Emma's father's funeral 3 years ago. It felt too tight now, or maybe I just felt too big, too present in my own skin. I wanted to disappear, to not exist for a few hours, to wake up and find this was all a nightmare. Daniel appeared in the hallway wearing the suit Rachel had bought for him. He looked older in it, not like my 14-year-old son, but like someone else entirely. Someone haunted and hollow and holding something explosive behind his teeth. Ready? I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. No. Me neither. We drove to the church in silence. The parking lot was already full, cars lined up along the street like a black ribbon. I recognized most of them, family, friends, neighbors, people from Emma's work, parents from Daniel's school. It seemed like everyone we'd ever known had come to say goodbye. Rachel met us at the entrance, her eyes red-rimmed, but her composure intact. She hugged me, then Daniel, holding him a moment longer than necessary. If you need anything, she whispered to him. Anything at all. Daniel pulled away without responding. The church was filled with flowers, white lilies everywhere, their scent thick and cloying, mixing with the smell of old wood and candle wax, and too many people pressed into too small a space. The organ played something low and mournful. I didn't know what it was. Emma would have known. The casket sat at the front, closed. I'd insisted on that. I didn't want Daniel's last image of his mother to be whatever the funeral home had done to make her look peaceful. There was nothing peaceful about drowning. We took our seats in the front row, Daniel on my right, Rachel on my left. Behind us, I could hear whispers, the rustle of programs, someone crying softly. Emma's mother, probably. She hadn't stopped crying since I'd called her with the news. The service began. The pastor spoke about Emma in generic terms. Loving wife, devoted mother, taken too soon, God's plan, mysterious ways. I stopped listening. The words meant nothing. They couldn't bring her back, couldn't fill the hole she'd left behind, couldn't explain why she'd driven off that bridge on a rainy Thursday afternoon. People stood to share memories. Emma's father, his voice breaking, a colleague from her office, talking about her kindness and dedication. Rachel, composed and eloquent, painting a picture of their friendship that made my throat tight. And through it all, Daniel sat beside me, rigid and silent, his hands clenched in his lap. I put my hand on his shoulder. He flinched but didn't pull away. The pastor was reading a psalm, something about green pastures and still waters, and walking through the valley of the shadow of death. The organ swelled. Someone in the back was crying harder now, gulping sobs that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. And then Daniel stood up. It happened so fast I didn't have time to react. One moment he was sitting beside me, the next he was on his feet, breathing hard, his whole body trembling. "Daniel," I started, reaching for him. He stepped away from me, into the aisle, and his voice cut through the church like a knife. "I know who did this." The organ stopped. The crying stopped. Everything stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. Every face in the church turned toward us, toward Daniel standing in the aisle with his fists clenched and his face white and his eyes blazing with something terrible. "Daniel," I said again, standing up, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sit down, please." He didn't look at me. He was staring at the casket, at the massive white lilies surrounding it. And when he spoke again, his voice cracked but didn't waver. "She didn't lose control. She didn't hydroplane. It wasn't an accident." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I heard Rachel gasp beside me, heard Emma's mother let out a wounded sound. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. "Daniel, this isn't the time. When is the time?" He whirled on me, and the look in his eyes made me step back. "When, Dad? When everyone's forgotten? When we've all moved on and pretended everything was fine?" "Nothing was fine," he said, and his voice rose, spiraling toward hysteria. "Nothing was fine, and everyone knew it except you. Except you." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Mom. I'm talking about why she's dead. I'm talking about—" He stopped, his chest heaving, and his eyes swept the crowd until they locked on someone in the third row. "Him," Daniel said, pointing. "Ask him." I followed his finger. Rachel's husband, Mark, sat frozen in his seat, his face pale, his mouth open in shock or denial or something I couldn't read. "Daniel," Mark said, half rising. "I don't know what you think." "I don't think," Daniel cut him off. "I know. I heard you. That night 3 weeks ago, when you came to the house after Dad went to bed. I heard everything." The church erupted, voices overlapped, people standing, Rachel's gasp turning into something between a sob and a scream. The pastor was trying to restore order, calling for calm, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I stood there staring at Mark, at Rachel's husband, at the man who'd been at our wedding, who'd been at countless barbecues and birthday parties, who'd helped me move furniture and fix my car, and who I'd trusted, who we'd all trusted. "You're lying," Mark said, but his voice was weak. "You're upset. You're grieving. "I'm telling the truth," Daniel said. His voice was steady now, cold and clear. "And everyone's going to know." Rachel grabbed Mark's arm. "What is he talking about? Mark, what is he talking about?" Mark pulled away from her, stood up, his face flushed. "This is insane. He's a kid. He doesn't know what he's saying." Mom knew, Daniel said. She found out about you, about what you did, and she was going to tell everyone. So you stopped her. No, Mark's voice cracked. No, that's not, I would never. You were having an affair, Daniel said. Every word was a bomb. With someone from your work. Mom found the messages on your phone when Rachel asked her to get your charger from your car at our house. She saw everything, and she told you she was going to tell Rachel. She gave you 1 week to tell her yourself, or she would. Rachel made a sound like something breaking. That was Thursday, Daniel continued, relentless. 3 weeks ago, the next Tuesday, Mom didn't go to therapy. She went to meet you, to give you one more chance. And 2 weeks after that, her car went off a bridge. It was an accident, Mark said, but he was backing toward the aisle now, his eyes wild. An accident, I swear. There were no skid marks, Daniel said. The police said so. No sign that she tried to brake. And Mom was a careful driver. She wouldn't take that curve fast in the rain. She knew that road. She drove it every day. I found my voice finally, though it didn't sound like mine. What are you saying? Daniel turned to me, and his eyes were full of tears now, spilling over, but his voice didn't break. I'm saying someone cut her brake lines. I'm saying it wasn't an accident. I'm saying he killed her. The church exploded into chaos. People shouting, Rachel screaming, Mark pushing through the crowd toward the exit. I saw several men move to block him, saw him struggle, heard the pastor calling for someone to call the police. And I just stood there frozen as Daniel collapsed into the pew and buried his face in his hands and finally started to cry. Everything after that was a blur. The police arrived. They took statements, questioned Daniel, questioned Mark, questioned everyone. Mark denied everything at first, then his story started to change, contradicting itself, falling apart. They found the affair. It had been going on for 6 months. They found evidence that Emma had confronted him. They searched his garage and found tools, a hydraulic jack, traces of brake fluid on his workbench. It took 3 days, but eventually Mark confessed. Not to murder, he swore it was meant to be a warning, a scare, something to make Emma back off. He said he only wanted to damage the car enough that she'd take it to a mechanic, miss a few days of work, forget about telling Rachel in the chaos of dealing with repairs. He said he didn't mean to kill her. The police didn't believe him. Neither did I. The funeral was postponed. We held it a week later, smaller this time, just family and a few close friends. Rachel wasn't there. She'd filed for divorce and left town, gone back to her parents in Oregon. I didn't blame her. Daniel and I stood side by side in the cold November wind as they lowered Emma's casket into the ground. This time there was no service, no pastor, no organ music, just us and the sound of dirt hitting wood and the truth settling over us like snow. Afterward, we went home. The house felt too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. Emma's coffee mug still sat in the sink. Her book was still on the nightstand, bookmark halfway through. Her jacket still hung by the door. Daniel went straight to his room. I stood in the kitchen staring at nothing, trying to understand how we'd gotten here. An hour later, he came back down. He had a shoebox in his hands. I need to show you something, he said. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals, where Daniel had done his homework, where Emma and I had had our last real conversation before everything fell apart. Daniel opened the shoebox. Inside were papers, printed emails, screenshots from a phone. I found these in Mom's car, he said quietly. The police gave me her things last week, her purse, her phone. I went through everything. I stared at the papers. I didn't want to read them, didn't want to know. You should read them, Daniel said. So I did. The emails were between Emma and her therapist, Dr. Chen, but they weren't about therapy. They were about Mark, about the affair Emma had discovered, about Emma's anguish over whether to tell Rachel. Dr. Chen had advised her to think carefully, to consider the consequences, to make sure she was prepared for the fallout. Emma's response, I can't let this continue. Rachel deserves to know the truth, even if it destroys their marriage, even if it destroys our friendship. I can't stand by and watch her be lied to. There were text messages, too, between Emma and Mark, him begging her to stay quiet, her refusing. Him getting angry, desperate, threatening. You'll regret this. Think about what you're throwing away. Rachel will never forgive you for this. And Emma's final message, sent the morning she died. I'm done waiting. I'm telling her tonight. I put the papers down. My hands were shaking. Why didn't you show these to the police? I did, Daniel said. After the funeral, after he confessed. They're evidence now. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He seemed older than 14, older than me maybe, like he'd aged years in the past few weeks. How did you know? I asked. At the funeral. How did you know it was Mark? I heard them, he said. That night he came over. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard voices downstairs. I came down and heard Mom and Mark arguing in the kitchen. She was crying. He was angry. He said if she told Rachel, he'd make sure she regretted it. He said she'd lose everything, her friendship, her reputation, maybe even you and me. What? He said you'd blame her for destroying Rachel's life, that you'd see her differently, that she'd become the villain in everyone's story. Daniel's voice was flat, emotionless. Mom told him she didn't care, that doing the right thing was more important than being liked. I felt tears on my face. I didn't remember starting to cry. After he left, Mom saw me on the stairs. She made me promise not to tell you. She said she'd handle it. She said everything would be okay. Daniel's voice cracked. She lied. We sat there in silence as the afternoon faded into evening. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows. Inside, the house creaked and settled around us, adjusting to the absence of the person who'd made it home. Finally, I spoke. I should have known something was wrong. I should have pushed harder, asked more questions. I should have. It's not your fault, Daniel said. I was her husband. I should have seen. She didn't want you to see, Daniel said. She was protecting Rachel, and she was protecting you from having to choose between her and your friendship with Mark. She thought she could fix it herself. She was wrong. Yeah, Daniel said softly. She was. We buried the shoebox in the back of my closet. The trial would come later. Mark was denied bail, charged with first-degree murder. The prosecutors had the confession, the evidence, the motive. It was, as they say, an open and shut case. But knowing who did it, knowing why, didn't bring Emma back. Didn't fill the silence in our house. Didn't answer the 1,000 questions I'd never asked her, never would get to ask her now. Daniel went back to school a month later. He was quiet, withdrawn, but his grades didn't slip. If anything, he became more focused, more driven. At night, I'd hear him in his room, studying or reading or just sitting in the dark. Sometimes I'd knock and ask if he was okay. He'd always say yes. We were both lying. 6 months after the funeral, on a Saturday morning, I found Daniel in Emma's old office. She'd used it for her work, her reading, her therapy homework. We'd kept it closed since she died, like a shrine neither of us wanted to disturb. Daniel was sitting at her desk reading through her journal. She'd kept one sporadically, mostly entries about things that made her happy or troubled her. I didn't know Daniel had found it. Hey, I said from the doorway. You okay? He looked up. His eyes were dry but distant. She knew something was going to happen, he said. What? Listen to this. He read from the journal, Emma's handwriting flowing across the page. March 15th. I'm scared. Not of telling Rachel. She deserves the truth. But of what comes after. Mark isn't who everyone thinks he is. I saw something in his eyes when I confronted him. Something cold. He'll fight this. He'll fight me. And I don't know how far he'll go to protect his secret. Daniel closed the journal. That was 2 months before she died. I sat down on the floor, my back against the wall, suddenly too tired to stand. She knew, Daniel said again, and she did it anyway, because it was the right thing to do. The right thing got her killed. Maybe. Daniel looked down at the journal. But she made her choice. She chose truth over safety. She chose Rachel over herself. That's who she was. He was right. That was exactly who Emma was. And I'd been too blind, too wrapped up in my own hurt and confusion and fear to see it. I miss her, I said. Me too. We sat there in her office as the morning light filtered through the windows, falling on her books, her papers, her empty chair. The house was quiet around us. It had been quiet for months now, a different kind of quiet than before, not the quiet of unspoken tensions and growing distance, but the quiet of absence, of loss, of learning to live with the hole someone leaves behind. Eventually, Daniel closed the journal and put it back in the desk drawer. "Dad," he said, "can I ask you something? Anything. Why didn't you fight for her before, when she was pulling away? Why did you just let her go?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I'd asked myself the same thing 1,000 times in the months since she died. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I was afraid, I think. Afraid that if I pushed, she'd tell me something I didn't want to hear, that she didn't love me anymore, that our marriage was over, that I wasn't enough." I paused. "It's easier to live with silence than with rejection." "That's stupid," Daniel said. "Yeah, it is. You should have fought for her." "I know. You should have made her talk to you. You should have told her you loved her every day. You should have." "I know," I said again, and this time my voice broke. "I know, Daniel, I know." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw Emma in his eyes, that same intelligence, that same determination, that same refusal to accept comfortable lies. "Don't do that with me," he said finally. "Don't let me pull away. Don't let silence win. If I'm struggling, if I'm hurting, if I'm drowning, fight for me. Promise." "I promise." "Say it." "I promise, Daniel. I'll fight for you. Always." He nodded, satisfied, and stood up. At the door, he paused and looked back. "She loved you, you know. Even when things were hard. Even when you two weren't talking. She told me once that loving someone isn't about the easy moments. It's about choosing them even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Then he left, and I was alone in Emma's office with her journal and her memories and the crushing weight of all the things I should have said and done and been. The trial happened in the spring. I testified. Daniel testified. Rachel testified via video call from Oregon, her face hollow and aged beyond recognition. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and came back with a guilty verdict. Mark was sentenced to 25 years to life. I felt nothing when the judge read the sentence. No satisfaction, no relief, no sense of justice served, just emptiness. Daniel and I left the courthouse and drove home in silence. That night we ordered pizza and watched a movie neither of us paid attention to. It had become our routine, finding small, meaningless ways to fill the time, to exist in the same space without having to acknowledge the vast grief between us. But after the movie ended, Daniel turned to me. "I'm glad he's in prison," he said, "but it doesn't change anything, does it?" "No," I said, "it doesn't. Mom's still gone, and we still have to figure out how to live without her." "Yeah, that's the hard part," Daniel said, "not knowing who did it or why. The hard part is the rest of our lives." He was 14 years old and understood something it had taken me months to grasp. Justice doesn't heal. Answers don't bring people back. Truth doesn't make loss any easier to bear. A year after Emma died, Daniel and I took her ashes to the ocean. She'd always loved the water, had talked about wanting to live by the sea someday. We scattered her ashes at sunset, watching them disappear into the waves, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt like I could breathe. "Do you think she's at peace?" Daniel asked. "I don't know. I hope so." "Do you think she forgives you for not fighting harder?" "I don't know that either." "I think she does," Daniel said. "She wasn't the kind of person to hold grudges, and she knew you loved her, even if you didn't always show it the right way." I put my arm around my son's shoulders, and he leaned into me, and we stood there as the sun sank below the horizon and the sky turned orange and pink and purple and finally black. "We're going to be okay," I said. "It'll take time, but we're going to be okay." "Promise?" "Promise." I don't know if I believed it then. Some days I'm still not sure I believe it now. But we're trying. Daniel and I were trying to build something from the wreckage. A new kind of family. A new kind of normal. We talk now. Really talk. About Emma, about grief, about anger and guilt, and all the messy, complicated feelings that come with losing someone you love. We don't let silence win anymore. When things are hard, we face them together. Daniel is 17 now. applying to colleges, making plans for a future Emma will never see. He's grown into someone remarkable, thoughtful, brave, honest to a fault. He's his mother's son in all the ways that matter. Sometimes I catch him looking at Emma's picture on the mantel, and I know he's remembering the good times and the bad, the truth he uncovered and the price it cost, the mother he loved and the justice he fought for. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I imagine what I would say to Emma if I could see her one more time. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder. I'm sorry I let fear win. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to face the truth until it was too late. But I also think about what Daniel said, that loving someone means choosing them even when it's hard. And I realize that Emma made that choice every day. She chose truth over comfort. She chose integrity over safety. She chose doing the right thing, even knowing the cost. She was braver than I ever was. On the 3rd anniversary of her death, Daniel and I returned to the church where he'd stood up and changed everything. It was empty this time, quiet except for the creak of old wood and the whisper of wind through the eaves. We sat in the front pew, in the same spot we'd occupied that terrible day, and Daniel said, "I used to regret it, standing up like that, making a scene, destroying the funeral. And now I think it's what Mom would have wanted. She spent her whole life standing up for what was right, even when it was hard, even when no one else wanted to hear it." He paused. "I was just finishing what she started." "She'd be proud of you," I said. "She'd be proud of both of us, for surviving this, for not letting it destroy us. We came close. Yeah, but we made it." We sat there for a while longer, 2 survivors learning to live with the weight of truth, learning that sometimes the right thing costs everything, learning that love isn't always enough to save someone, but it's enough to honor their memory. Before we left, Daniel turned to me one more time. "Dad, do you think she knew, before it happened, that she was going to die?" "I don't know, maybe." "If she did, do you think she regretted it? Standing up to Mark? Trying to tell the truth?" I thought about Emma's journal entry, about her fear and her courage, about the choice she made knowing the cost. "No," I said finally. "I don't think she regretted it, because that's who she was. Someone who chose what was right over what was safe, every single time. Even when it got her killed. Even then." Daniel nodded slowly, accepting this, carrying it with him the way we both carry her memory, as a weight and a gift, a burden and a blessing, a constant reminder of the person we're trying to be. We walked out of the church together into the bright afternoon, father and son, bound by loss and love and the truth that tore our world apart, and somehow, impossibly, started to put it back together again. Sometimes truth sounds louder than prayer, and it hurts more than anything in the world. But it's the only thing worth dying for, and the only thing worth living for. Emma knew that, and now, finally, so do I.